Following a drought-led rise in inflation in 2011, East African countries have seen lower inflation through 2012 into the first half of this year. The easing trend in inflation was underpinned particularly by lower food inflation as agricultural conditions improved. For more, I'm joined by Rydal Marcus, Africa strategist at Absa Capital. Rydal, thank you so much for making the time to join us. Now, we know to a large extent that food has historically been a dominant driver of inflation. Can you talk us through the general food and production trends that have come out of the region?
Well, basically, I think the key characteristic of this region, of course, is the very volatile weather conditions that we see. And we did see in 2011, we saw a drought which impacted the whole region. So back then, inflation, went up to 30% in Uganda and close to 20% in Kenya, and along the same levels in Tanzania. And with the improved weather conditions, improved agriculture output, etc., we have seen that food inflation particularly has come down quite rapidly over the past year and a half, and that is obviously underpinned the decline in inflation. And of course, we know that food is quite an important driver. It's close to well over 48% of the total basket in Tanzania. Kenya is about 36% of the basket, and Uganda around 27% of the basket. So whatever happens in food, of course, is definitely very, very important for the rest of the inflation picture.
Of course, Rydal, the remainder of that basket is made up of non-food items. Can you talk us through how non-food inflation has fared in comparison?
Well, non-food inflation is actually, it is moderated as well, but there are some pressures coming through again, and we believe with particular risks such as the transport risk and also on a taxation front where we've seen a sort of a broad increase in the tax base across the region in June. Some of those haven't been implemented yet, but will probably be at some point. And that's put some upside risk on particularly the non-food inflation, and hence we believe that the inflation story, particularly in Kenya and Uganda, is turning slightly more negative, while Tanzania's inflation is still on a downtrend, but at some point that downtrend will also come to an end and you will see inflation increasing there as well.
If we cast our eyes back to just a few weeks ago, Rydal, of course, we saw that in Kenya, that value-added tax bill coming into play, and although the interest rates were kept, were held at 8.5%, we also saw that there was quite a significant decrease in the number of tax-exempt items on the consumer's shopping list, coming off that list. Should we understand this as something that is specific to Kenya, or are we seeing the region in general begin to reduce the number of goods on its tax-exempt list?
I think the focus is not so much on the good itself, but rather on the pressures that governments are experiencing on the revenue side. So in Uganda, we've seen a deteriorating relationship with donors, obviously causing a bit of a cash crunch for governments. So government in Uganda is under pressure to increase their revenues. In Kenya, we've seen the devolved system of government adding to spending, and hence we've also seen Kenyan authorities looking at various measures to increase tax base. So each one of these countries have got a very specific reason, but I think the common factor here is that there's a realization that you need to increase your domestic revenues. Donor funding is under pressure, and that is what's been behind these removal of exemptions and increasing of certain rates, etc. However, I think going forward, the authorities will probably be more mindful in putting undue or even more pressure on consumers, and I think we'll probably not see the same kind of announcements that we saw this year in the next budget. So
for an investor who's eyeing these particular movements, Rydal, where would you say the opportunities are in the rates market?
Well, for now, we believe that there's probably better entry levels for, yes, we do see yields going higher in Kenya and Uganda, where certainly international investors can get opportunities. But, currency risk is very real in these markets at the moment. We see currencies drifting slightly lower in coming months. And then, of course, the issues, of course, withholding taxes as well. So you could probably find opportunities Elsewhere in the region, we just think that Kenya and Uganda for now is probably is probably best just to wait for better entry levels. But yes, there will be investors that may see it as an opportunity even at current levels.